Howdy, folks. This video is from a show I recently did on Cameron Bertuzzi's channel, Capturing Christianity. If you like it, do all the YouTube things to let YouTube know to show the video to others. Be sure to like, comment, and share the video. And I am trying to grow my channel, so be sure and subscribe and hit the bell notification. Don't forget to check out Capturing Christianity and support the work that Cameron is doing there. Hope you enjoy this.
Okay, so in case you guys haven't heard yet, there's this guy named Brandon Biggs who recently prophesied the assassination attempt on Trump in some very interesting detail. I've covered this in a few videos on my channel, but I thought that it would be good to actually go a little bit deeper into investigating the sort of background and the other videos that Brandon has put out. And I chose Jimmy Akin to join me on this venture. What we've uncovered has been very interesting, and we actually plan to play a number of clips today so that you guys can kind of see, just get a better idea of kind of who this guy is. And the purpose of today's show is not to bash Brandon or to bash prophecy more generally. What we want to do is just try to really understand like what's going on. Like Brandon seemingly got this one very interesting detail correct about this bullet flying by Trump's ear, which we're going to play the clip on that in just a minute. He got that detail correct, causing damage to his ear. And that's raised a lot of questions for people. Like if he accurately predicted this, what about the other predictions that he's made? And that's actually the title of this video. He's made a prediction that there's going to be this major virus, a major plague, way worse than COVID, that's going to wipe out almost 500 million people on the planet. And so, yeah, we're going to be taking a look at that. We're going to be taking a look, again, at sort of his broader backstory and just trying to get a better idea of who this guy is. But Jimmy, yeah, great to have you back. You know what? Every time you and I talk, I'm pretty sure every time I get off the phone, I'm like, God, I like Jimmy so much. Like you and I, there's something about you, Jimmy. I love chatting with you and thinking through these issues and stuff. So I'm so happy that you're here.
Well, you're very kind, and I always enjoy our conversations too. And this is a subject I'm interested in. I'm a student of biblical prophecy, and I have been for decades. I also am a student of parapsychology and phenomena like precognition. And I had not heard of Brandon Biggs before the assassination attempt on President Trump. So I'm kind of coming with a blank slate with him. I don't know a whole lot about him. I've done some research that we're going to get into here. But to me, it's a fascinating subject. You know, if someone has a hit that a correct, prediction that is that specific, a bullet's going to go by his right ear, he's going to get blood on his face, stuff like that, that's notable. And so my ears perk up when I hear something like that, and I want to find out, okay, so there's always a possibility of a random chance guess that just happened to be true, but does he have other predictions that have borne out? How do his predictions normally work? And so it was a fascinating intellectual puzzle, and I haven't plumbed the depths yet because I haven't done a super deep dive, but I have done some research into Brandon Biggs, and we've uncovered some interesting information that we're going to be sharing with folks.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you know what? I'll go ahead and mention it now. There's actually, well, you guys are probably familiar if you follow this channel. This is what Brandon Biggs looks like. We're going to play, as I say, some clips from him in just a moment and start to analyze what's going on here with him and his ministry and the things that he said so far. But I actually noticed this on Twitter the other day, or X. Mike Winger, is kind of small on the screen, but Mike Winger is saying that he's actually planning on producing a video on Brandon Biggs where he's going to expose him for being sort of dangerous. And so we'll be kind of on the lookout for that, because as Jimmy and I have looked into Brandon, there's actually one of the interesting things about Brandon is that there's almost nothing that you can find on the internet about him prior to basically a year ago. So he started posting on his YouTube channel a year ago.
Actually, in 2021 was when he started his YouTube channel. I don't know when he became active in posting it, but that's when he joined.
Okay. Well, then maybe because I was looking at his most recent videos, or his oldest videos, and the oldest one was only a year ago. So I'm wondering then if he's made some of his older videos unlisted, or if he just didn't do anything with his YouTube channel during that time. It's very interesting.
A lot of people have YouTube channels that they join so they can comment on other people's videos, but then they don't post videos themselves. So it may be that for, between 2021 and 2023, he had a YouTube channel where he just commented on other people's videos, but he wasn't posting himself. That's also a possibility.
Well, yeah. So Mike is planning on producing this video. I assume he'll probably put it up this week. We'll just have to see and kind of wait and see what he says and discuss the things that he has discovered as he started to research Brandon Biggs a little bit deeper. But let's start with the first clip that we've seen. This one is "The Three Prophets Explain Three American Solar Eclipses." Interesting title, but this is where the initial, at least the more public proclamation that he made, or prophecy that he made about the assassination attempt on Trump, and it was made on this other guy's channel, Steve Coglianti. I don't think that's the right way to pronounce that, but he made the prediction on another YouTube channel, and he made this around 4 months prior to the assassination attempt, and so that's why people are kind of thinking that this is super interesting. Maybe we should start to listen to what this guy says and what he's talking about. And he's since grown or blown up in popularity. But let's just begin the stream with playing this clip so that we can get an idea of like why we're doing this.
Just so folks know, this video was posted on March 14th. So it was several months ahead of the Trump assassination attempt.
Yeah, and let me actually see if I can pull that here. Yeah, show more. So March 14, I don't know if you guys can see this on the screen. If you zoom in, it says March 14 right here. So this was published, back in March. And that's why people are very interested in this. But let's watch this clip, and then we'll start to comment and provide some more background.
The Lord told me, he said, I am not done with America. Amen. He said there's going to be a new wave of patriotism coming out, and that's whenever I saw Trump, and I saw a red wave coming out of Michigan, and then I saw Oklahoma, and there was embers of people, and they were all on they had torches all throughout Oklahoma, and they were raising up these torches that looked like fire, and they were bringing forth a new patriotism upon the nation, and it was being birthed, and it just kept spreading like fire all throughout America, all throughout. And I saw Trump rising up, and then I saw an attempt on his life. This bullet flew by his ear, and it came so close to his head that it busted his eardrum. And I saw he fell to his knees during this time frame, and he started worshiping the Lord. He got radically born again during this time frame. I'm talking, people say he's saved now, but he becomes really on fire for Jesus, for what I saw coming. And then I saw people interceding I saw him winning the presidency through great. The Lord showed me it would go clear into the summer. Great persecution would come on him through the judges and through the law and all these people trying to sue him and all this stuff. But there would be a stop to it, and things would start to break free come toward the fall. And then I saw him winning the election through the Patriots coming out and voting. And
maybe we should just pause there and start to comment a little bit on this so far. I mean, I've shared some of my thoughts, and some of the critics have been explaining that he's got some of the detail when it comes to the assassination. He's got some of the details wrong, and he's attempted to explain those in terms of like when he predicts that Trump blew his eardrum. He actually admits in a later video that detail was wrong. He sort of added on to the vision that he saw. All he saw was that a bullet flew by, and then blood was streaming down his face, and so then he inferred on that basis that there was a blown eardrum, but he didn't actually see that happening. And so he sort of admits that it was a mistake to mention a blown eardrum based on what he saw in his vision. That's his attempt to explain that. But then other people have said that he nevertheless gets some of these details wrong. And so, but yeah, Jimmy, what are your thoughts so far on this?
Okay, so in terms of the assassination attempt itself, he said that he saw a bullet go past his right ear, and he said he saw blood on the face, and he interpreted that as his eardrum bursting. Whereas what actually happened was the eardrum did not burst, but the bullet penetrated part of the external ear lobe. And it was from the ear lobe that the blood came, not from the eardrum inside the ear. And so, yeah, that's a detail that doesn't match what actually happened, but I wouldn't consider that a problem. Now, there are some folks who would say any mistake that an alleged prophet makes shows he's a false prophet. And I understand that view, but I think when we look at the biblical understanding of prophecy, it's actually more nuanced than that. And that's even biblical prophecy. This would be what various Christians, including Catholics, would refer to as a private revelation. It's not part of the Bible. It's not on the same level as biblical prophecy. And in the Catholic Church, it's recognized that seers, even when God is revealing something to them, that it can be colored by their own understanding and their own perception of things. So, for example, several hundred years ago, one of the big controversies in private revelation circles was how many nails was Jesus crucified with? Was it 3 nails, 1 through each palm and 1 through both legs? Or was it 4 nails, 1 through each palm and 1 through each leg? And you had some visionaries seeing Jesus crucified with 3 nails, and some visionaries seeing Jesus crucified with 4 nails. And there was a debate about what's the right number of nails and which of these visions should we be relying on. Well, then Cardinal Prospero Lambertini, who was later elected as Pope Benedict XIV, wrote a multi-volume work on evaluating subjects like this. He wrote it for purposes of beatifying and canonizing saints. And he treated this question in there, and he said, guys, God has not given people visions of Jesus on the cross to teach them about the number of nails. That is not what these visions are for. It's to help people appreciate what Christ did for us and grow closer to him. So when God gives someone a private revelation of Jesus on the cross, the spiritual message is what's important. And we shouldn't be looking to these for what's the exact number of nails that Jesus was crucified with. That's a minor detail. It's not relevant to the major message that's being sent, and it's going to be colored by the seer's own consciousness. So the seer's consciousness may fill in 3 or 4 nails, just like in other contexts. If Jesus or someone appears to someone in a vision, he may be dressed differently, or he may appear differently based on the ethnic group that the person belongs to, or the culture that the person belongs to. Those minor details are filled in by the consciousness of the seer. And so in this case, if Brandon Biggs got information about a bullet's going to go past former President Trump's right ear, and he's going to be injured and have blood on his face, I would say, and he interprets that as his eardrum blew, I would say, well, that's an interpretation. That was filled in by his own consciousness, his own thinking about it. But it doesn't mean that God didn't give him a genuine perception of the future. The question is, how did he interpret it? Just like if you watch a video of the assassination attempt itself, I mean, Trump's head is turned, his right ear is turned away from the camera. You can't see exactly what's happening. And you could watch a video of Trump's assassination, and some people might say his earlobe got hit, and other people might say maybe his eardrum blew. So that's a matter of interpretation that I don't think really I don't think it allows us to settle the question of, is he a true or false prophet based on that?
We've got to look at other details. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe it'd be a good opportunity right now to, well, I mean, I can at least highlight that we do have a bunch of different Bible passages that we're planning on getting through at some point, just to kind of, because I mean, trying to determine whether someone is a true or a false prophet from like a biblical perspective, there's not a whole lot of data that we've got from the Bible on how to do this. And I just like with a lot of things in the Bible, like you wish that there was more there sometimes to try to like determine exactly how to go about answering some specific question that you've got, but the information that we've got on this is somewhat limited, and so I think that that's actually causing some confusion among people. Some people are saying that this guy is a true prophet, others are saying that he's not, but it's based on, or at least in part, on these passages that are they provide some information again, but they don't like settle the matter. They don't teach us exactly what to do and what to expect, and whether or not, for example, the small details are super relevant, and that we can, just on the incorrectness of the small details, rule out someone as a false prophet. There's no Bible passage that says anything like that. Although it does mention, testing the spirits and stuff like that. But Yeah, well, why don't we do this? Let's continue with the prophecy, at least the initial prophecy from Brandon, because we've got some more things to say about this initial one that he makes. And then there's another clip from an earlier on clip from the same video. Is that what you were about to mention?
Well, I wanted to mention, I'd like to just, so I commented on the assassination attempt part, but it's part of a broader set of predictions that he's making. And I just wanted to summarize those predictions so that folks will have them in mind. What he said in this clip is that there's going to be a new wave of patriotism coming from places like Michigan and Oklahoma. He saw President Trump's assassination attempt. He says he fell to his knees during this time frame, and that's ambiguous. Obviously, President Trump fell to his knees to get out of the way of the bullet, on the spot. But that doesn't seem to be what Brandon's talking about. He's talking about President Trump converting, having a conversion experience or a spiritual awakening, which he describes as becoming radically born again. And so that's how I would interpret his statement about President Trump falling to his knees. He means as part of this spiritual awakening. He says that there will be great persecution of President Trump through lawfare. He doesn't use the word, but people suing him in courts and stuff like that. And he says it's going to continue into summer and stop towards the fall. He then says that he sees him winning the presidency, and he goes on to say that there's going to be an economic crash that's coming into the next year, perhaps, that's going to be worse than the Great Depression. So that's kind of the overall package of what he's saying here. Now, obviously, the President Trump thing happened. The assassination thing happened. In terms, he was injured and did survive, just like Brandon saw. I think you could argue, is there a new wave of patriotism? Kind of either way. It's normal for an election cycle to have people interested in politics and patriotism and hanging out flags and stuff like that. So I don't know. I think people could take different points of view on that. We'll have to see what happens with, does President Trump experience a notable spiritual awakening? Obviously, he's shifted tone somewhat since the assassination attempt and projected a more
I would actually push back a little bit on that, just because of his recent tweets. So during the Republican National Convention, he did seem to sort of express himself a lot differently. So he was a little bit more, I don't know the right way to put this, but he seemed a little bit less confident, less arrogant. He seemed very deeply saddened by what happened to at the event, not just with himself and there being an assassination attempt on him, but the other people in the audience that either died or were very seriously injured. And he seemed very concerned about that. And so that does seem to be,
and that's what I'm referring to.
Yeah. But unfortunately, he has kind of gone back in his tweets and stuff to be kind of like his old very combative self, calling people crooked Joe Biden. Even in another tweet that I posted recently, he called him a weak and pathetic man. Which I don't know that a sort of radical, on fire for God Christian would necessarily be drawn to make those sorts of comments. Anyways, yeah. So I think that it's not really very clear that he's had a sort of radical shift or change just yet.
And that's what I was going to say. Conversions take time, and we'll have to wait and see on this. I was just going to say he's had a little bit of shift in tone, but it's not enough for us to conclude he's had a radical spiritual awakening. We'll have to wait and see. We'll have to wait and see, does he win? And we'll have to wait and see, is there an economic crash that's worse than the Great Depression? The one element of this set of prophecies that I think we have a little bit more insight on is his prediction regarding the lawfare against former President Trump. Now, remember, this prophecy was posted on March 14th. It may have been even earlier than that when they recorded it, but that's when it was posted. And at the time, there were multiple different lawsuits against President Trump in different states. And there was a Supreme Court case that was pending. And subsequent to that, most of that's gone away. The Supreme Court ruled affirming a fairly strong version of executive privilege and they remanded stuff back to lower courts. One of the cases, I think it was the case in Florida, got dismissed. And even though there's still some legal jeopardy out there for President Trump, what Brandon said he saw happening was it continuing through the summer, which is where we are now, but ending in the fall. And actually, it looks like even though it's not completely resolved, the bulk of the lawfare has already kind of run its course, and much of it has been stopped now in the summer rather than the fall. So it looks to me like that may be a partial miss.
Let's now turn to the same video, and maybe we'll go to the earlier clip now, where he mentions some record high temperatures in the Northeast and some anomalous weather events. And so let's play this one and get some comments from Jimmy on it.
About this eclipse is that he said, basically when I was praying a couple weeks ago, he said to me, he said, Brandon, I want you to watch Passover. For when Passover comes, there's going to be an acceleration of things, even more so from what it was from Rosh Hashanah to Rosh Hashanah. He said, but this will be a time of great acceleration. And he said, you'll see acceleration in the financial realm. And he said, you're going to see acceleration in the politics, and you're going to see acceleration in war. And he told me, he said, these things are going to, he said, for my son's return is imminent. And he told me this. He said, when this happened, when Passover, this time of Passover happened, there would be such a great, is almost, and he told me about weather. And he told me, he said, there'll be great.
That was an interesting cut they made just then. Did you notice that?
Mm-hmm.
And he told me about weather.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, what else they cut out there.
Well, yeah, although they had to do it before they posted it on March 14th, I would assume.
Right. Well, no, I'm just curious, like if they cut anything else out that he might have predicted that didn't look like it was going to happen. I don't know.
Temperature rising in Chicago through New York and some of the other areas up east. And he said there'll be record-breaking temperatures during this time frame. And he warned me about storms, long-track tornadoes, and for the body of Christ to take their authority over these storms, because they would be these tornadoes, they'll be the largest tornadoes we've ever seen in history, potentially, being long-track tornadoes. And then he said microburst. He was talking about 150 mile per hour winds would come out of these microbursts, and he was talking about taking authority over that and praying over that.
Okay, so here he's given a set of weather predictions between Passover, which was April 22nd, and Rosh Hashanah, which is October 4th. So basically, if you ignore the last little bit of April and the first little bit of October, that's basically May, June, July, August, and September, a 5-month period. And he says we're going to have record high temperatures in various cities in the Northeast. Well, I don't view that as much of a prediction, because you could predict that just by, if you listen to global warming advocates and the media that reports on global warming issues, they've been selling a narrative of record high temperature for years. I remember months ago, before 2024 even began, there were predictions it's going to be from secular people, not people claiming to be prophets. There were predictions from secular people claiming it's going to be the hottest year ever. So merely predicting we're going to have record high temperatures somewhere in the U.S. during a 5-month period, well, that's a pretty safe bet. So I don't view that as a really strong prediction.
Just to kind of comment on that really quickly, I think that's also sort of indicative of some of the other prophecies that he makes. And what I mean by that is that he will oftentimes make predictions that are sort of vague just in the right way, so that it can be considered a hit, or it might be considered or you can't really rule it out as a miss if it doesn't necessarily happen. Even in his sentence right here, he says, these are the largest tornadoes on record, potentially. Like that little added
Yep.
potentially kind of saves him from, if it's not, record breaking and we just get some tornadoes, then it's not necessarily a miss.
Yeah. And that's the next thing I was going to turn to is his claim. The specific quote he says is they're going to be the largest tornadoes we've ever seen in history, potentially. And anytime I see a word like potentially in a claim like this, I mean, I hate to say
I mean,
it,
this
but
is supposed to be this is supposed to be a
Yeah.
prophecy, right?
Yeah, the term, I use it in other contexts, but in other contexts, I would call that a weasel word, which is a word that you put in so that you have a fail-safe in what you just said. So if they're not the biggest tornadoes we've ever seen in history, you get to make a really dramatic claim, biggest we've ever seen in history, potentially. So you have a way out of being falsified there. Well, and he also talks about microbursts resulting in 150 mile an hour winds. I don't have any data on microbursts happening in this time frame. I haven't looked that up, but he's right. Microbursts are a thing, and they can result in 150 mile an hour winds. You were
really
say
quickly.
about that?
Yeah. So I live in the Houston area, and we've had some pretty interesting weather events here over the past couple months. So we had a Derecho. I think, when was that one? I think it was in May. I can't remember the exact date, but it was not too long ago. It was within a couple months ago. And it was definitely after Easter. So that is fairly consistent. I think we actually had records of over 100 mile an hour winds in downtown Houston, which was just like a random storm just produced winds like that. That's pretty abnormal. And then we recently, just 2 weeks ago, had a hurricane come in, which is one of the earliest hurricanes on record, at least in our area. It only hit us with as a category 1, so it wasn't like this huge destructive storm, at least not as destructive as it could have been, but it was nevertheless pretty bad for a lot of people. We were without power for 6 days. So at least in the Houston area, we've had some pretty bad weather, but I wouldn't necessarily put that as, I mean, Houston has always sort of been experiencing weird and wacky weather events. So just a couple of years ago, there were some really serious droughts, and we went for very long periods of over 100-degree weather consistently. This year, actually, speaking of high temperatures, the temperatures have been very mild for Houston. So we've been in the low 90s pretty much, which is still pretty hot, but for us, it's pretty mild. So at least in the temperatures, it's on the low side. But as far as like the Derecho and the hurricane and stuff, we have seen some of those events in Houston.
Yeah. Now, in terms of his claims about microbursts producing 150 mile an hour winds, so microbursts are a different phenomenon than hurricanes. And so what I would want to know, if in researching this, is how many microbursts normally occur during the course of a year. Because, I mean, it is a known weather phenomenon. They happen. And so I would want to know how often they happen, and have they happened more this year than they normally do. Unfortunately, I don't have data on that. What I do have data on is tornadoes. Now, tornadoes are measured on an intensity scale. It's called the Enhanced Fujita Scale. And on the low end, there are tornadoes that we can tell are there, but they don't do any damage. And then it goes all the way up to category 5. And category 5 on the Enhanced Fujita scale is as high as it goes. That's the strongest kind of tornado. So have we seen, he said, we're going to have the largest tornadoes we've ever seen in history, potentially. Have we had any category 5s? Or, well, okay, so I looked at the data because this is easily accessible. In May, so this is after Passover, in May, there were 473 measurable tornadoes in the United States, which is more than average. The average is 268 for May. So this was a notable increase in the number of tornadoes in that 1 month. But the highest strength of a tornado was category 4. There were 2 category 4 tornadoes and no category 5 tornadoes in the United States. In May, yes. In June, there were 120 tornadoes compared to an average of 213. So there were actually way less tornadoes in June than there normally are. So whereas May was higher than normal activity, June was lower than normal activity. In June, there were no Category 5s and there were no Category 4s. The highest it got was there were 2 Category 3 tornadoes in June. In July, which we're not quite done with yet, thus far there have been 142 tornadoes compared to an average of 119. So that's a little higher than normal, but not much. There have been no Category 5 tornadoes and no Category 4 tornadoes and only 1 Category 3 tornado. So we're not really seeing this prediction fulfilled yet. It could happen in August. We start getting Category 5 tornadoes. It could happen in September, but we're running out the clock on this one, and thus far it's not happening.
Yeah. And what would you say? I mean, this kind of brings up another question. Like, what do we make of the fact? Like, suppose that we can pinpoint and locate some really specific prophecies that he makes that nevertheless that sort of fail to come to pass. Mm-hmm. What does that imply in terms of like his status as a prophet? Does that mean that he didn't prophesy the assassination attempt? What are the implications of finding these false hits?
So I think there are a number of different categories that he could be placed in. So let's start with the true prophet. So he's a true prophet. God really is talking to this guy. That's one possibility. All the other possibilities will be, well, that's not really what's going on. Something else is going on. The question would be what? Well, it could be something involving the preternatural. He could be getting, and I'm not proposing this, I'm just mentioning it for the sake of mapping out the concept space. He could be getting revelations from demons. I don't see any evidence of that. I'm just mentioning it as a hypothetical explanation that could apply in some cases. Another explanation is nothing preternatural is happening here, but something paranormal is happening. Maybe he has a precognition. Maybe he had a precognitive experience. It wasn't God talking to him. It was his own precognition. Or maybe, and I don't want to talk about him because I'm going to say here are explanations that could explain someone, putting themselves forth as a prophet. Mental illness is another possibility. People can be mentally ill and innocently think they're seeing things. If it's not mental illness, it could be imagination. They're just imagining this stuff and they put it out.
And he happened to get that detail correct.
And he happened to get it correct. Or it could be fraud, where it's conscious. Someone knows I am not a prophet, but they are simulating being a prophet. And so you've got true prophet at the top. Then you have various not true prophet explanations. The more paranormal ones would include a demon's talking to him, or it's something psychic going on, or it's mental illness, or it's imagination, or it's conscious fraud. For my purposes, I'm most interested in, is it true prophet or something else? I'm less interested if it's something else in trying to figure out specifically which one of those things it is. But if someone has a single hit that's specific and goes beyond random chance, you can't, and the Trump assassination thing does. There's no way you could guess by random chance that, not plausibly, that there's going to be assassination attempt on President Trump. He's going to be hit in the right ear and he's going to survive. Making that kind of a guess by random chance that's an extreme long shot. So that's a notable hit. But if it's surrounded by bunches of false hits, then it doesn't exceed random chance anymore. If I get to make 1 million guesses, some of them are going to be startlingly accurate, but that doesn't mean they're not just guesses. If I make 1 million of them, sooner or later you're going to hit something improbable that you'll guess by random chance. So if you see a notable hit, that's surrounded by lots of junk, then it's going to wash out the evidential value of the one hit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it also doesn't necessarily mean that if you've got one hit, that means that he's got to be a true prophet, because that's consistent with a lot of the other hypotheses. Well, really all of the other hypotheses. You might just think that it's really improbable that he does make that hit, but it could nevertheless be that that's the right answer, that it was just his imagination, and that it just happened to sort of line up with the truth in this one case. You and I were actually talking about something somewhat related, where I have an experience where when I was in high school, I was I don't know, I think we were maybe in between classes or something. I had a friend with me, and he was tossing a coin up and down, and I was guessing like what the how the coin would turn up. And I had this experience where I kind of felt like I knew what the answer was going to be, like what it was going to be each time that he threw it up. And I think we did this about 6 times, and each time I got it right. And each time that like he flipped it and turned it over, I felt like I was almost either I had the same confidence level, or I was even more confident that I knew what the answer was going to be. And by the 6th time that it happened, he started to look at me like, how do you know that this is happening? And I kind of wondered the same thing myself. I was like, how am I doing this? But the one of the obvious explanations here is that I just got lucky. Like, this is one of those cases where it felt like I had the right answer, but nevertheless, it was just luck that he was flipping the coin in his hand, and I just happened to guess the right number each time, or the right side each time. That doesn't necessarily, even though that's improbable, doesn't necessarily mean that there's some other hypothesis was going on, like a demon was feeding me information.
Yeah. In that case, so there's a 50%, assuming the coin is fair, there's a 50% chance it's going to turn up either side. And if you're able to guess it 6 times in a row, like you said, that's a 1 in 64 chance. So if you had 64 people trying to do this, on average, one of them would guess correctly each time. And so it's not it's a low order of probability, but it is still within the realm of what can reasonably happen. That's why in parapsychology, when they're studying things like precognition, they don't stop at 6. They do hundreds and thousands of trials to see if statistically what the phenomena holds up. Because if you flip a coin, and these days they don't use coins, but if you flip a coin enough times, you will hit stretches where it behaves in a regular way or a predictable way for stretches of time. And so what you need to do is tons of trials to see, does this really hold up when you test it thoroughly. But still, if you do it 6 times in a row, that's enough to get your attention. Very definitely.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was enough for my friend to be like, "What are you doing?" and I was like, and I think actually during the time I like tried to act like I knew what I was doing, but it was totally just random chance. All right, let's turn now to go back and actually watch the video that he put out 8 days, or it was 8 days ago at this point, but I think he put this one out either a day or a day after the assassination attempt. And the reason why we're showing you this one is because it kind of goes into, he just titled it "It Happened," and this one kind of goes into his views on prophecy from his own perspective, which is important, I think, for us to look at.
Yeah, and this came out on July 13th.
Every single day for things that the Lord gives me, and he warns me about things, and he tells me, "Brandon, this is coming. This is coming. This is coming. You got to pray for the volcano in Italy. You've got to warn those people, because I told you I saw a tsunami wave coming into the shore, and I saw hundreds of thousands of people perishing because of the tsunami wave coming in." And I've warned everybody about that. And now those volcanoes are coming up, and it's happening right now. And the major one has not happened, but I believe.
Real quick, I mean, do you know what the background on that one is? That he's got these predictions of tornadoes, or not tornadoes,
volcanoes.
Volcanoes, yeah.
Oh yeah. We can talk about the volcano one.
Okay.
But he's talking about his general. Well, he's laying some groundwork. You'll notice he's talking about how
people need to listen to me.
Yeah, God shows him these things, and then he encourages people to pray about them. And he's developing his philosophy or model of how his prophecy works. And it's very interesting. So let's continue with this one.
Like I said, y'all, we have authority. I don't come on here and just tell you all this stuff and just drop these things like a fortune teller. I'm trying to tell you this so we can intercede and stop the plans of the enemy. We have authority to stop the devil and in his tracks. If you realize, when I come on here and I tell you all what the Lord's doing, and he says, hey, Brandon, I want you to go on there and warn the people what the enemy's trying to do. And, we have 50,000 people watch it. How many people are watching the video and praying? If one, Abraham, stood in the gap for Sodom and Gomorrah, and the Lord was willing to spare it, and he was interceding, and look at what happened. He kept coming back and saying, listen, I'm willing to spare the city if there be 5 righteous, 10 righteous, whatever. And then here we are. We have 50,000 people watching a video, and they're praying for peace and for protection and by a watchman. Like here I am, a watchman. I'm standing up on the wall, and I'm saying, look, there's a storm coming. I have a storm coming, and I warn everybody down below on the wall, from the wall, and saying, listen. And then everybody over there is preparing and praying and believing God for protection for President Trump and praying for America. Look at what we can do if we join together as one, and we pray together as one, and we intercede as one, and we say, no, devil, thus far and no further. You will not touch these people. You will not touch our children. You will not touch our loved ones.
Okay, so his basic idea that a lot of what he's doing with his prophetic ministry is God shows him something that apparently is what the devil is planning to do, and then he takes it before his YouTube audience and tells them about it so they can intercede about it, and then they use. Now he has this idea that's quite common, especially in the charismatic movement, of claiming authority over spiritual things. Mm-hmm. And so he's saying, use that authority to stop the plans of the devil based on the visions he's been shown. Now, I find that very interesting. Unlike anything we find in the Bible, I'm not saying it can't happen, but it is not the model of prophecy in the Bible. In the Bible, God says things like, okay,
Jimmy, why don't we go ahead and just review the different passages that are relevant to prophecy? Let's just run through them, the major ones. So in the, let's start with Deuteronomy 13 in the Old Testament. So yeah, feel free to go through this one. I'm not going to read it all out, but feel free to mention what this one says, and then we'll move on through to the others.
Yeah, so real briefly, Deuteronomy 13 says, if a prophet or a dreamer of dreams arises among you and gives you a sign or a wonder, and the sign of the wonder that he tells you comes to pass, so he's had a prophetic hit, and if he says, let us go after other gods, which you have not known, and let us serve them, you shall not listen to the words of that prophet or the dreamer of dreams, for the Lord your God is testing you. So the basic principle that's being established here is don't listen to people who encourage idolatry, even if they have prophetic hits. So the revelation that God is going to send is not only going to have prophetic hits in it, it's also going to be consistent with other things God has taught, like you should worship only me. So anytime you got someone saying, oh, and let's go worship Baal, or let's go worship Astarte or whatever, it doesn't matter if they have prophetic hits. Write that person off. They are not a true prophet. So that's kind of the main thrust of Deuteronomy 13. Similar issue comes up, though, in Deuteronomy 18. In Deuteronomy 18, there is a list of basically pagan practices that that Canaanites were performing. And what these have in common, it's not obvious in each case because of the English translation. It doesn't correspond exactly to what's in the Hebrew, but what these different practices have in common are these are ways of obtaining information from a supernatural source. And God says, don't do any of these things. Instead, The Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet like me from among you, from your brothers. It is to him you shall listen. And then he says, he gives some historical background for this, but he says, I'm going to raise up prophets from your own number. So this is how you guys, the Israelites, are to get supernatural information. You don't use these pagan practices, you get it from a prophet. Mm-hmm. And whoever does not listen to my words that he shall speak in my name, I myself will require it of him. So if you dismiss what a genuine prophet says, you're going to get in trouble with God. But the prophet who presumes to speak a word in my name that I have not commanded him to speak, or who speaks in the name of other gods, so there's that other gods problem, that same prophet shall die. So you're going to put this guy to death if he speaks things God has not commanded him to speak, or if he's advocating idolatry. But how do you know? If you know whether he's speaking a word that God wanted him to speak? Well, that's the next subject. And if you say in your heart, how may we know the word which the Lord has not spoken? When a prophet speaks in the name of the Lord, if the word does not come to pass or come true, that is a word the Lord has not spoken. The prophet has spoken it presumptuously. You need not be afraid of him. So don't be afraid to punish him if his sign didn't come true. God didn't speak that, and so you don't need to worry that you're going to get in trouble with God for ending this prophet's career, so to speak. So those are the two major passages in the Torah that deal with prophecy, and they both deal with accurate hits prophetically. You know, the prophet names a sign, and it comes true or doesn't. And idolatry. Those are the two issues that God is primarily concerned with here. But there's another passage. Now, based on these two passages, some people have said, okay, so this is a one strike and you're out rule. If you make a prediction and it doesn't come true, then you're a false prophet. And that's actually not the case, as illustrated by a passage in Jeremiah. In Jeremiah, the word of the Lord came to Jeremiah. He told him to go down to the potter's house. This is the famous potter's house passage. And he sees the potter working on the clay, and there's a flaw in the clay, and it spoils one of the things the potter's working on. Then the word of the Lord came to me, O house of Israel, can I not do with you as this potter has done, declares the Lord? Behold, like the clay in the potter's hand, so are you in my hand, O house of Israel. If at any time I declare concerning a nation or a kingdom that I will pluck up and break down and destroy it, so that's like what he prophesied about Nineveh. And if that nation concerning which I have spoken turns from its evil, like Nineveh did, I will relent of the disaster that I intended to do to it, just like God does with Nineveh in the book of Jonah. And if at any time I declare concerning a nation or a kingdom that I will build and plant it, meaning do good stuff for it, and if it does evil in my sight, not listening to my voice, then I will relent of the good that I had intended to do it. Now, therefore, say to the men of Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem, thus says the Lord, behold, I'm shaping disaster against you and devising a plan against you. Return every one from his evil way and amend your ways and your deeds. In other words, so that you can avoid the disaster. So the way biblical prophecy works is it's often conditional. And so if God announces a doom on a particular city or people or nation and they repent, God will revoke the doom. On the other hand, if he promises a blessing on a people or a city or a nation and they do wicked stuff, God will revoke the blessing. So a lot of prophecy, and it's actually much more prophecy than people realize, is in the Bible itself is conditional. So there's a basis for what Brandon Biggs is saying in terms of depending on how we react, the future can be changed.
If we intercede.
If we intercede and so forth. The problem is, or at least one problem is, he's doing something that is never described in the Bible. God never shows up to a biblical prophet, like let's say Isaiah, and says, Isaiah, I want you to tell my people, here's what the devil is planning to do to you. And therefore get all the Israelites to pray so it'll be stopped. Okay, that I'm not saying God can't do it that way, but there's no biblical precedent for that. And so that's a caution sign to me that we want to be careful with what Brandon Biggs is saying, because it's just unprecedented. And there are some additional concerns that we can get to. But I wanted to note, we shouldn't be applying a one strike and he's out rule here, especially with private revelation. But we also don't want to just say, okay, the future can be changed and that means anything goes.
Yeah, how about we talk about the verses in the New Testament that are also sort of relevant here?
Sure,
there's a couple. Yeah, 1 Corinthians 12.
So in 1 Corinthians 12, St. Paul is talking about spiritual gifts, and in particular, the spiritual gifts of prophecy, the spiritual gift of prophecy. And he says, I want you to understand that no one, speaking by the Son of God, ever says Jesus is accursed, or in Greek it's Jesus is anathema. And no one says Jesus is Lord except in the Holy Spirit. So this is a test that St. Paul proposes for how to tell true prophets versus false prophets. True prophets are going to say things like Jesus is Lord, and false prophets are going to say things like Jesus is anathema or Jesus is accursed or things like that. Now, that's a true principle, but it has to be applied with some nuance, because one of the things that I've seen happen is various preachers, particularly in the Pentecostal movement, will say Jesus is Lord over and over again in an attempt to prove that they're speaking by the Holy Spirit. But I think you need more than that to show you're really speaking by the Holy Spirit, that you're a true prophet and that something beyond nature is happening here. Because I can say Jesus is Lord without claiming to be a prophet. But we do have a basic orientation here. I think the generalizable principle from this is that whatever God reveals through a prophet has to be consistent with prior revelation. And Paul's given us a concrete example here. It's been revealed already, Jesus is Lord. That's consistent with prior revelation. So if you're saying Jesus is accursed, that's not consistent with private revelation. And so that's an indicator of false prophecy.
All right. Now, the last one to cover would be 1 John 4.
Yeah. So
From the
in
New
1
Testament.
John, from the New Testament. I mean, there are some other verses that have a bearing here, but these are the two that give us practical tests. So John says, Beloved, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits to see whether they are from God. By the way, this is something I often have to point out to people, because some folks have the idea that if a spirit shows up, you're not supposed to talk to it. And you should kind of run away and, I don't know, put your head in the sand or just pray or something like that. No. The New Testament expects you to encounter spirits, and it expects you to put them to the test. And that means you talk to them and you ask them questions. So John says, Beloved, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits to see whether they are from God. For many false prophets have gone out into the world. By this, you know the Spirit of God. Every spirit that confesses that Jesus Christ is come in the flesh from God, and every spirit, so that's how you know the Spirit of God. Every spirit that confesses that Jesus has come in the flesh. If they acknowledge the incarnation, that's a sign that they're a good spirit. And every spirit that does not confess Jesus is not from God. This is the spirit of the Antichrist, which you heard was coming and is now in the world already. Little children, you are from God and have overcome them, for he who is in you is greater than he who is in the world, and so forth. The basic principle here is if a spirit is acknowledging the incarnation of Christ, that's a sign it's on team good. If it refuses to acknowledge Jesus as come in the flesh, that's a sign it's on team bad. And again, this is the generalizable version of this is new revelation must be consistent with previous revelation. So that's kind of a summary of the major passages in both the Old and the New Testament that give us practical tests for figuring out if something is genuine prophecy or not. In the Old Testament, if there's idolatry involved, it's fake. And if there are genuine hits, that's a good sign. If there are failed prophecies that don't come true, that's a bad sign. In the New Testament, if it talks up Jesus and his incarnation, that's a good sign. If it dismisses Jesus and his incarnation, that's a bad sign.
Yeah, so like I said, it's kind of it doesn't give you like these sort of explicit, or at least in the terms that maybe we would like to see, is exactly how you test that someone is a true or false prophet, especially given the conditional nature of prophecy that we went over from Jeremiah. So, but what makes all of this, I think, even more sort of confusing in the case of Brandon is that he will make some prophecies that are just very vague. And I think that's sort of unfortunately common of a lot of quote unquote prophets these days, is that they make claims that are just vague enough to where, again, you can kind of say that it was either a hit or a miss, depending on what actually turns out. Like the word potentially, these tornadoes that are so strong that they're potentially the strongest ever. But yeah, let's listen to this one, because this one is very relevant to what happened yesterday. In case you guys haven't heard, President Biden completely backed out of the presidential race. And he did so on Twitter, which is an interesting fact. But in this video, which was posted 13 days ago.
And he endorsed Kamala Harris.
Correct. And this one is the title of this video is, "Will Joe Biden be removed and Kamala Harris step in? Prophetic confirmation." So
and you got to listen to this one pretty carefully. So yeah.
And this one, it's about 2 minutes, so we'll play this one and then get some more comment on it.
So, do I believe this is going to happen in 2025? I still believe it's going to happen. I still believe America's going to be dumb and they're going to try to steal the election. In my opinion, do we have an opportunity to pray and fast and seek Him? Yes. But do I believe the outcome in 2025 is still going to be bleak? Personally, I do. I believe that America is still going to be dumb and vote wrong. It's just where I'm at. I told you all to watch Michelle Obama. I told you all to watch Gavin Newsom. Now the timing of these two, could it be in the next time of election of 2028? Would that be 2028 and 4 more years after that? I don't know. The Lord told me to watch Gavin Newsom. He told me to watch Michelle Obama. I saw these things. I told you I saw Joe Biden being removed because of mental stuff. I saw Kamala Harris running things a little bit for a certain time. I saw a short blonde-headed lady. The Lord showed me her. I couldn't see her face. It was blurred out. She had shorter blonde hair. I believe it could be Elizabeth Warren, or I could believe it could be Hillary Clinton. I don't know. Running as vice president, trying to keep things afloat for a season. I don't know if that happens anymore. These things I see, and the Lord has me intercede for them. And it's like, when you see in part and you hear in part, and you're just given things, and when you're praying, you get downloads from the Lord. And I see, they're like pictures, they're visions that pop up before me, and the Lord will show me things. And I'm like, well, did we stop this from happening or not? I don't know. So I just keep interceding. Y'all, I'm just being real with you. I don't have everything all figured out. I get these little warnings from the Holy Spirit, and He warns me about this. Like I said,
yeah, are they warnings or are they prophecies?
Yeah, so this is a concerning passage to me in what he says. For one thing, you'll notice he starts off by talking about they're going to try to steal the election and America's going to be dumb and vote wrong. Well, wait, didn't you just say in your, so he said this on July 8th. That's when this video was posted. But back on March 14th, in that video, you said Trump's going to win. And this guy seems to be a Trump supporter. And the steal the election narrative, came from the Trump side. And so it sounded like here he's saying that Trump's not going to win. And so it sounds like he's made two contrary predictions to me, potentially, unless he would care to clarify that. But then notice the way that a lot of this is phrased. He says, God told me to watch Gavin Newsom, he's the governor of California, and Michelle Obama, the former First Lady. And there has been talk about both of them getting into this presidential race. But then all he said is, God told me to watch them, not definitely what they're going to do. And then he throws another complication into it by saying maybe this applies to 2028, to the next presidential election instead of this one. So he's got significant ambiguity here that could go several different ways, and he could claim a hit if either Gavin Newsom or Michelle Obama entered the current race. He could claim a hit. God told me to watch them, right? And then look what they did. Or if either one of them runs in 2028, which is a safe bet, I mean, at least for Gavin Newsom, he can claim a hit then. And so without any supernatural stuff, I could tell you that one or both of those people, especially Gavin Newsom, is likely to, without any supernatural download, I can tell you Gavin Newsom is likely to run for president either this year or in 2028. But the ambiguous way that Brandon Biggs is setting it up, he gets to claim a prophetic hit either way. He then
let me just mention this really quickly. I mean, because it almost sounds like this is not necessarily a prophecy on his part. It almost sounds like he's just kind of spitballing about what might occur. But the way that we find out that this is a legitimate prophetic word on his part, or at least alleged prophetic word, is that he calls it prophetic. The title of the video is prophetic confirmation. Yeah. So he is attempting to give some sort of prophecy here, which is a lot different than the prophecy that he made about the assassination attempt, which was way more specific, and it fell within a sort of time frame and timeline, whereas this one is just kind of all over the place and doesn't really even match the description of a prophecy. So,
well, except he says
some red flags here.
He said God showed me this and God showed me that. So, and God told me to watch these two people. He then says that he saw Biden being removed for mental issues. Now, he didn't say removed from what. In the context, this video suggests removed from the campaign. But if you actually watch carefully what he says he saw Kamala Harris running things for a time. And he saw a lady with short blonde hair who he interprets as possibly Elizabeth Warren, possibly Hillary Clinton, running as vice president. And then he says later in a part that I don't know that we covered, he says he saw Biden being removed around a November-December timeframe. So that would be after the election. So it sounds like the scenario he's portraying here is not that Biden's going to be removed from the election and replaced with Kamala Harris. It sounds like he's saying that Biden's going to be removed from office in November or December and temporarily replaced by Kamala Harris, who will then have a female vice president with short blonde hair. Actually think that's unlikely because given that Kamala Harris is multi-ethnic and female, the Democrats tend to balance their presidential tickets so that they have different demographic categories for president and vice president. So I think it's more likely they're going to pick a white male to be vice president if they pick Kamala Harris to be at the top of the ticket. But we've just got all these different options here. I mean, it's not quite word salad, but it's pretty close to that. And he could claim hits if anything remotely similar to this happens. Mm-hmm. So I given this multiform ambiguity, I'm quite uncomfortable with what he's doing here. Now he says, I'm just telling you what God showed me. And maybe he's sincere about that. Maybe that's what he thinks is happening. But it is also consistent behaviorally with the behavior of someone who is a conscious fraud and is trying to set up future ability to claim hits without being super specific now.
Let's turn now to his next video, and Jimmy, you can maybe kind of set this one up for us and why you think we should look at this one. But in this one, 3 weeks ago, he says that the Lord showed me an earthquake hitting the West Coast. Prophetic warning.
Now, normally he talks about earthquakes on the New Madrid fault line in the center of the country, but as he mentions in this is something towards the western part of the country, and here he actually does give a very specific prophecy. This is not like the previous prophecy that went in 5 different directions at once. Here he describes a very specific sequence of events. This clip is kind of long, so I don't know that we're going to play all of it, but I can summarize what we don't cover.
And all of a sudden, the Lord said, I want to show you something. I heard him. And I saw a square, a massive gold square that was really thick. And it was a supernatural covering that was over Yellowstone National Park.
Okay, sorry, let me just kind of mention one thing really quickly. Just on the basis of the way that he presents himself, it doesn't seem to me like he's a fraud. So that hypothesis, I think, can be relatively ruled out fairly conclusively because of the way that he presents himself. In other videos I've watched from him, he's crying because of how emotional this is making him. And it could be the case that he's just this really great actor, and he's acting angry when he should be angry, as if he was like sort of telling what he really feels to be the truth. But as we're going to see in some later videos, which we'll get to in just a minute, about the plague that he prophesies that's going to be coming soon. In that one, he's made some life changes to attempt to avoid what he really genuinely believes is coming down the line. So it seems to me like he really believes this stuff. It's not necessarily that he's trying to be this sort of fraud figure, that someone is paying him to do these sorts of things. That hypothesis, I think, can be ruled out with relative
Well, that's an interesting perspective. I think I would keep it on the table, but I understand the arguments you're making. I think I may be a little more cynical about how good of an actor frauds can be.
Yeah, well, I think in his case, given my evangelical background, it does seem to me like someone could be duped. Maybe too strong of a word, but it seems like someone's theology could open them up to this type of stuff, and being very concerned about it. And and I'm not convinced he is a fraud. I just note that some of his behavior is consistent with the behavior of someone committing fraud. I'm thinking of people like Marjo Gortner. I don't know if you're familiar with him. Not familiar with him.
He was a Pentecostal child evangelist back in the 1950s, and his name is a contraction of Mary and Joseph. So Marjo Gortner, he was a child evangelist, and there are videos of him, as a 5-year-old marrying people and stuff. And he had this really dynamic Pentecostal ministry up to the early 1970s. And then he did a kind of farewell tour where he went around preaching revivals at different Pentecostal churches. And he had a camera team with him to make a documentary about this revival series he was doing. And what the audience at these revivals didn't know is that when he and the camera team went back to their hotel room, he would talk about all the fraud he'd just committed. He was outing himself as a fraud, as a Pentecostal evangelist. And he would talk about the techniques that he would use. Like, for example, one of the techniques he would use, which he said others used too, was he got this powder that was normally invisible, and he'd put it on his forehead in the shape of a cross. And then when he goes to preaching, he's getting all excited, and he's getting energetic, and he starts sweating, and the powder turns red. And so people will see a bloody cross appear on his forehead, and then he wipes it off. And then people will come up to him after the revival and say, "Brother Marjo, when you were preaching, I saw a bloody cross appear on your forehead." And he's talking about the prophetic aspects of what he would do. And he would say things like, when he's on a radio show, and he actually says he got this technique from another evangelist. I know there's a little old lady out there right now who has $10 in the top of the lid of her cookie jar, and God wants you to send in that $10 right now. And with a national radio audience, there are going to be bunches of women. They got $10 in the top lid of their cookie jar, and we'll send it in. And so he kind of goes through this catalog of different fraud techniques that that were used, and he had the integrity to out himself. He then later tried to switch over to being an actor, and he had some parts as an actor, but not a hugely successful career. But I've kind of made a study of frauds, and so just because someone cries or stuff like that, I'm not as convinced.
Okay, maybe we can do this. I know that we're kind of on a side right now because we started this clip from Brandon about the earthquake. But there's this other article that I think was interesting, and I wanted to talk about it at some point. There's this website called Protestia. I don't know how you would pronounce that correctly, but what they claim is that no, this prophet did not prophesy the Trump assassination attempt, and their arguments against it don't really, I don't think they're as strong as they pretend that they are, but they nevertheless make some claims, which I've actually reached out to them on Twitter to confirm. I'd like to look at the primary sources that they mention here, because in my research, I didn't find any of I wasn't able to confirm any of this. There's, again, like before a year ago, there's almost nothing on the internet about Brandon Biggs, which is pretty wild. But anyways, that aside, so this is what they say. They said he's described in vivid detail the upcoming start of World War III. They're talking about some reasons or some missed prophecies that he's made in the past, regaling his audience with all of the details of how that began. And this is where they put in bold, and notably has previously falsely prophesied a major crash of the economy in 2013, urging everyone to buy rations and supplies, which resulted in anyone who believed him suffering financial hardships. Okay, and they report that this happened in 2000, or it would have happened before 2013, but he prophesied that 2013 would result in this economic crash. Again, I don't have the primary sources for this. I'd love to have them to be able to sort of verify and look deeper into this. But then they say, in fact, he is reported. Exactly. This is what's reported by this website. In fact, he has also personally called up everyone he falsely prophesied to say sorry, and was subsequently forbidden by one pastor from ever prophesying in their church again. He also prophesied around this time that silver would go to $100 an ounce and that the Iraqi dinars would skyrocket, also urging everyone to invest in it, even though it tanked and they again all lost their shirts. Doesn't seem like the right word to use there.
Lost their shirt, common English idiom for losing money in the stock market.
Oh, okay. Never heard of that. But the reason why I'm bringing this up is it's interesting, and I wish we had the primary sources so that we could verify whether or not this is correct. If it is correct, that seems like pretty interesting information that a lot of people need to know about. So hopefully they get back to me, and hopefully maybe even Mike Winger has got some more information on this. Let me check Twitter real quick to see if they've responded. They have not. So, okay, that's fine.
Yeah. I look forward to seeing what Mike comes up with.
Yeah, I definitely agreed. But the reason why I'm talking about this now, related to the question of whether or not this guy's, intentionally trying to be this fraud and trying to dupe people, and maybe now that I'm reading this back, it could, I guess, go both ways. But it seems like if this is true, this seems like a track record of him just trying to really get things right and being wrong about them. And so, but again, that's just kind of how it strikes me. So it could be the case that he was intentionally trying to mislead people back then and is still doing it today.
Yeah, you could. The way to make that case would be to note that if this report is accurate, which we don't yet know because we haven't seen the primary sources, but if the report is accurate, then he has a track record going back at least 11 years of making false prophecies that hurt people and that he was held accountable for, and he hasn't course corrected. And he's also, it's very hard to find anything about him on the web that's over a year old, but this is 11 years old. And so, like you asked at the beginning, could he have hidden older videos and things like that because they contain false prophecy? That's something that has to be considered in light of all this. So I'm not convinced that he's a conscious fraud. He may be, he comes across as a sweet, sincere guy, and that may be exactly what he is. But he's also not very credible as a prophet, as we're finding out. And here in this clip, he makes a very specific set of predictions that if it happens, it'll be way beyond random chance. But there's an asterisk that I'll give you after we've seen a little bit of what he says here.
And he had put a covering over this area. And it was a massive square that went all the way up over these states. It was a golden square, and it was placed. And he had sewn it all on those states, sewed it. He had sewed it. I could see a golden thread that was weaved all throughout this golden garment that looked very thick. It was a thick piece of something. And it was over those states, over that volcanic area. And he had put a covering of protection and of peace over that. It was sealed to the earth. Okay, it was sealed to the earth. And all of a sudden, I saw that golden stuff that was tied to the earth. It was released, and it had a gap in between the earth and this golden protection that was over that area. And all of a sudden, I felt a violent volcano go off in that area. A violent volcano. And I saw Portland, Oregon. And I saw the Space Needle in Seattle. Completely destroyed. I saw that the area between Portland, Oregon, and the ocean going this way, it split off from a massive earthquake. A massive, massive earthquake. The largest earthquake we've ever felt in this area before. Ever. It was a humongous earthquake. And the land from Portland, Oregon to the ocean broke off into the water. Okay? And you could see the ground of this, I believe it's the San Andreas Fault. It lifted up the land up higher. And this land was lowered down to sea level. It was all the way to San Francisco, but San Francisco was not as affected as Portland, Oregon, and Seattle.
Okay.
The Space Needle thing that was in the air was gone.
Yeah. So if you want to pause it there, I'll summarize the rest of what he says. Basically, he says there's going to be a volcanic eruption in Yellowstone National Park. And at the 1712 mark, he does specifically say in Yellowstone National Park. The Space Needle,
which a lot of scientists, from what I understand, like a lot of scientists are predicting something like that. There's a huge, massive volcano underneath Yellowstone that could erupt at any time.
Yeah, and so he's not beyond. This is not the part that's beyond what could reasonably be predicted. There are lots of people who've, on purely scientific grounds, who have predicted that at some point we're likely to have a major eruption in Yellowstone. What he then predicts, though, is that the Space Needle in Seattle falls. You know, that's one of the major architectural features of Seattle. So that's specific. He then says that the land will split off from Portland to the west, and the fracture will go down to San Francisco, but it won't be as bad in San Francisco as it is further north. He says that water from the Pacific Ocean is going to rush in and cover the land to a depth of about 5 feet in some areas and much more in other areas. And there will be a tidal wave that will smash into Alaska and also Japan, that Tokyo will be completely destroyed, and also Hawaii is going to be hit with this tidal wave. British Columbia is going to be destroyed by an earthquake. And he says that that Anchorage, Alaska is going to be on fire. And he says he doesn't know why it's on fire if it's just been hit by a tidal wave. And frankly, I don't either, because water tends to put out fire. So I don't know why you'd have massive fires in Anchorage right after Anchorage gets hit by a tsunami. In any event, that's his overall package of prophecies of what he sees coming out of this volcanic eruption in Yellowstone. And it's all very specific. You couldn't guess this by random chance. For once, he's not going in a bunch of different directions with this prophecy. This one is very specific. And as I listened to him describe it, I said, there's not going to be a date on this one. This is so specific, he can't give it a date or a time frame. And sure enough, at the 1824 mark in this video, he's praying to God, and he says, only you know the timing of when this happens. So yeah,
1824 or 1842?
1842.
Let me play that real quick.
Yep.
You know the timing of this, when this happens. Father, I thank you, Lord, for divine
Yeah.
Okay.
So he when he makes a specific prediction, so when he made vague predictions like about Gavin Newsom and Kamala Harris and all that stuff, he gave us time frames where it could be fulfilled, but it can go in multiple ways. When he gives us a specific prediction that cannot go in multiple ways, there is no time frame for when it's to be fulfilled. This could happen 20 years from now.
I'm also wondering how this fits into his broader view on prophecy of how interceding can help change the course of what might occur. Do you think? Did you get the impression as you watched this one that that's also something he believes about this prophecy? That if we just sort of pray hard enough, we're going to be able to avoid this massive earthquake?
Well, he might believe that, but notice it's different than the theory of intercession he articulated earlier. Because in the video he posted called "It Happened," he said that God has given me a peek at the devil's plans, and we can claim authority over those and pray those away. But in this video, he says God has put a protective cover over Yellowstone National Park and sealed it with like golden thread, and then God removes that. So he could, I guess, say, well, we could pray that God leaves it in place and push this off indefinitely into the future, and maybe it never happens. But here, if you're claiming authority over something, or if you're praying about something in connection with this, like, God, please don't cause this big disaster, then you're doing something different than what he articulated earlier. You'd be undoing a plan that God himself has announced that God is going to do.
So I want to reiterate a couple things and then kind of let you guys know what to expect if you watch the rest of this video. First of all, thank you guys for watching if you've watched up until this point. I promise that we've got some more interesting things that we're going to cover momentarily. We're going to be talking about his prediction of this plague that's going to allegedly kill 350 million people. And then after that, we're going to give some just overall concluding thoughts on what to make of this. But I just wanted to reiterate that this whole stream is not to talk bad about Brandon. It's really to really dig as deep as we can and try to assess what this guy is sort of all about, because a lot of people are watching him and are starting to come away thinking, well, if he's predicting all these really terrible things that are going to happen, maybe we should start to believe him and we should start to take precautions and start to do things based on the things that he's telling us is going to come up. I mean, and we've seen this with other prophets who have predicted the end of the world, so to speak, and or like the day of Jesus's return and whatnot. And people will literally change their life and change what they're doing. And it also caused them immense anxiety, possibly even depression, based on what these people are saying. And so I think it's really important that we cover this topic. It's not, again, to bash Brandon or to bash prophecy in general. It's just to really try to get to the bottom of this and to get to the truth of it.
What we're doing is we're implementing what St. Paul says to do in 1 Thessalonians 5:21. He says, don't despise prophecy, don't quench the spirit, but test everything and hold fast to what is good. So I don't despise prophecy. I'm very open to it. And I know you are too, Cam, but we're told to test it and hold fast to what is good. And so we're doing the testing part right now, and then we'll give you our conclusions about how much good we see here.
Yeah, part of the reason why this topic interests me is because prophecy from an apologetic perspective is not something I've done a whole lot of work into. I know some people have actually made arguments for Christianity based on fulfilled prophecy. Those arguments I haven't really looked into personally, but this one just kind of came up as a result of the recent events that occurred, and I thought this might be a good opportunity to start to get into some of these issues and their overlap with apologetics. But now let's turn to the videos that the title of this video is about, which he predicts that there's going to be this plague coming that is worse than COVID. It's going to kill 350 million people, apparently. And so let's play a clip from this video, and then he's got a follow-up video that we'll play and get comments on from Jimmy.
It was complete shutdown worldwide again. No grocery stores were able to be opened. It was like essentials only, like if you could go in there. But it was people were so scared of this thing that there was no movement of humanity, because if you got it, you weren't here no more. There was no anti thing for your arm. Nothing. There was nothing to stop it. Anybody who contracted this thing was gone. Then I saw 350 million again worldwide. Then I saw 30 over the United States, 30. And the Lord warned me about the mass things that would happen here.
Okay, so here he's legitimately crying, and actually earlier in the video he cries even more. Let me play a little bit of it. And the reason why I'm playing this again is not to make fun of him, but it's to show that it seems like he's sincere about this stuff. And it could just be that he's just a really good actor. But let me just play a little bit of it so you can kind of see what I'm talking about.
I weep for humanity. For him. Help me, Holy Spirit, to get through this. You see what's coming. In intercessory prayer, he tells you the weight of it. He tells you the responsibility of what's coming.
I think that's enough of a sampling. If you guys are interested, you can go watch more of it. Again, the title of this one is just "The Lord Showed Me a Plague Coming and 350 million people would perish." But yeah, I mean, it still just seems to me like he's at least being sincere about this. Maybe I'm just underestimating his skills as an actor. But is there another clip from this video that you'd like to play, or you want to go ahead and give comments on so far?
Let me comment on it so far. I'll mention a couple of things with time code so people can look it up. So in this part that we watched, he talks about how there's this coming plague. It's going to cause a complete economic shutdown. He says that from what he says in this clip, the plague sounds 100% fatal. He says if you got it, you weren't here no more, and anyone who contracted this thing was gone. So that sounds like 100% fatality rate. He says he saw 350 million people worldwide and 30 million Americans, that would be 30 times worse than COVID. About 1 million Americans died from COVID. He also says that paper currency is going to be replaced. And this idea of a digital currency is very common in some circles, particularly in Pentecostal and evangelical circles, although there isn't anything about digital currency in the Bible. They didn't have the concept of digital currency in the Bible. If you then look between 1255 and 1429, he says that he sees a group of people of God in white. They're here on earth, so they're not dead. They're a living remnant of good people. He says he sees a 3-foot radius around these remnant people where they're kind of glowing. He refers to this as the glory of the Lord, and he says it looks like honey, so he refers to it as the honey glow around these people dressed in white, and he says it kills the virus. He says he saw the virus is airborne, that it floats like fog or something over the ground, but it tries to interact. When it encounters the honey glow around these people, it dies. And then between 1715 and 1800 in the video, he says he sees this remnant in white healing people and raising them up off their cots, and they're curing people of this disease. And so that's the overall sequence he sees. Now, what I found interesting, because this is all very specific, it's something that could have a natural explanation. This could easily have a natural explanation because we just went through COVID, and lots of people have fears, including subconscious fears, stirred up about COVID. People are already talking about when is the next time this is going to happen, because COVID proved to everybody that this can happen. And so it's not unexpected that he would come up with a prediction like this. But I noticed I didn't hear a date. I didn't hear any kind of time frame for this. All he said was in the future. He said, God took me into the future. And so again, we've got a specific prophecy, something 30 times worse than COVID, but we don't have a date. And that makes it impossible to test. So he put that video out on July 4th. But then 2 days later, on July 6th, he has another video that he put out where he makes this virus sound very different. Here, he just says it's bad, but he makes it sound like anyone can get it. And that's why people were so scared to like go into the supermarket and use cash. He said this is what ends cash because people are afraid to touch it. And that makes it sound like anybody can get this virus. But here in this July 6th video, the Lord showed me more about the 350 million and what's coming. He makes it clear that not everybody is going to get this virus, or certainly not everyone's going to die from it. Whereas in the first video, he said, if you get it, you're gone.
Sorry, I'm just kind of looking through some of the comments here. It looks like he recommends that people lose weight in this video, which we'll talk about in just a second.
He does.
Yep. But a lot of the comments are like talking about weight loss. So I mean, he's having a really big impact on people. All right, let's play this clip.
I was taken up in the spirit and I saw a meeting, and they were contemplating the next virus. Okay, they were in a room, and I could see these heads of these leaders. And that's where I'll leave that. I won't say who I saw. Doesn't matter. But they were negotiating. And the obesity epidemic across the world has reached heights beyond anybody's comprehension on purpose. Remember whenever I told you all I saw the 350 million people perish? 350 million would go home. But I didn't know. I thought it was going to be a kind of like a COVID thing. Well, okay. Oh, God, help me here. I saw a laboratory. I saw AI. AI, computer technology and AI was creating a super virus. They were using...
Now, is that what AI looks like?
Well,
the AI...
It's a representation.
To create something more dangerous in the end times than what COVID was. I could see DNA strands running like computers, like computer code. Okay. And COVID, there was lines. There were lines. Now, I'm not a smart person about this kind of stuff, y'all. I'm just telling you what I see. I saw DNA lines. But COVID was clear over here. Like, it was barely even used in this new strand. Okay?
I mean, this sounds like a straight-up dream that he had while after, like, taking a whole bunch of Benadryl or something.
Well... being charitable to him. So he says he saw this meeting, and he's going to reveal, and he's in the process of revealing. We don't need to play the whole thing, but he's saying that the next virus is a planned release virus. That there is a conspiracy to kill all these people. They use AI for assistance in designing the virus, which is then manufactured in a laboratory. He gives a time frame of in the end times, but he believes we're in the end times now. In fact, he thinks that if I understand him correctly, he thinks we're somewhere in the period of the book of Revelation where the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse are in the process of coming out. He says that DNA lines from diabetes and high blood pressure and cholesterol medicine are used in the designing of this virus, which doesn't really make sense, but cutting him some slack. The virus, he says, is designed to target people who are obese and people who have conditions related to obesity, like diabetes and high blood pressure. He says this time, skinny people will not perish. That if they get this virus, they're going to be okay. But it's people who are obese that that are going to be the targets of this. At 6:08, he says that he heard in this vision that obesity is a drain on our economy, it's a drain on society, therefore we must eliminate this. So this is a targeted genocide to take out obese people and people with significant health problems. And then he talks it. Now you might be wondering, well, this gentleman doesn't look exactly thin himself, and he acknowledges that. He's upfront about that. He says he's taken this seriously and is now embarked on a major weight loss program. He says he's lost 30 pounds or 35 pounds. He's planning to lose another 30, and he ultimately wants to get 100 pounds or something like that off, which is great for him. And this is potentially evidence of his sincerity. He then makes an impassioned plea to his audience that they need to lose weight now too, in order to avoid this coming super plague that targets obese people. So in terms of evaluating this, well, this gentleman has a history of making super dramatic claims. I mean, notice how he talked about the biggest tornadoes ever, possibly, or the biggest volcanic eruption we've ever seen in history in this part of the country, and 350 million people dying and 30 million in the U.S. and worse. He has this extreme, or he has a tendency to make extreme prophecies, and a lot of them: financial crashes, World War III, volcanic eruptions, hurricanes, tornadoes, plagues, assassinations, all kinds of different things. And I find it, I find that a lot of his prophecies are vague, either in terms of what they mean or in terms of when they're going to happen. And my conclusion is I don't see a lot of evidence here that this gentleman is getting regular prophetic contact with God. He had a hit with his prediction on Trump, but this guy makes so many super dramatic prophecies that could just be random chance, given how many super dramatic prophecies he makes. He's not like a normal person who doesn't make super dramatic prophecies and then has one that turns out to be true. This guy makes super dramatic prophecies every day. And so it's not surprising that one of them would turn out to be true. So I don't see compelling evidence that this gentleman is a genuine prophet. I suspect he's in one of those other categories. I don't particularly know which one it is, and I'm not particularly interested because I've got the threshold question answered to me. Do I need to be freaked out about what this guy is saying? And I think the answer is no. He makes so many prophecies that are so vague and so shifting, with his whole let's claim authority over this and pray it away, that I don't see a good basis here for saying this guy is genuinely having contact with the supernatural. And frankly, even if I'm wrong about that, he and his prayer partners have it covered. So I'm not going to worry about what he says.
Yeah, I've tried to make my own assessment of the situation, and I guess the biggest thing for me to comment on would be that I think that a lot of the criticisms of his stuff have been somewhat weak. Like the skeptics that I'm seeing respond to this are, first of all, just sort of expressing incredulity. Like there's prophecy doesn't happen. This guy, therefore, the probability of him being a true prophet on that basis alone, like you shouldn't even entertain it because the probability is so low, which strikes me like something like incredulity, like you just don't find it plausible in the first place, which is sort of exactly what I'd expect to see from skeptics. But for other folks, especially Christians who are open to these sorts of spiritual gifts, who are open to supernatural powers and other things, we don't have those lower priors on these sorts of events. And so the objections that I'm seeing from an intellectual standpoint are not too damning, so to speak. Like I don't see them as proving beyond a shadow of a doubt or anything that this guy is a false prophet. But the thing that troubles me about him is that he's very vague in the things that he says, to the point where that's one of the reasons why it's difficult to disprove him or to show that he is a false prophet, is because I think he's wise enough to know that you don't want to be too specific, because if you're too specific and the things don't come to pass, then people can peg you as a false prophet, especially on the major things. Even those questions surrounding the minor details about, did it go past his ear? Did it go through his ear? Was it a bursted eardrum, or was it, was it because of the earlobe? Like those, I think, are sort of minor details. The major detail with respect to the assassination attempt is that a bullet flew by his right ear and caused damage. And that's the thing that I think should get people to start thinking about this. But on the major details, that's where I'm like, I don't really know, because he's so vague about his predictions. That's, I think, kind of troubling. And that's what's also just contributing to the fact that it's difficult to ascertain, the truth about this guy. Now, I think for me, though, the biggest red flag is the fact that there's nothing about him prior to about a year ago. I did, on several occasions, I did searches on Google, and I limited my search to prior to a year ago, and there is no information at all that pulls up about him. We have this article from Protestia, that website that I mentioned, that has some of this information. We don't have the primary sources on that, so could be true, could not be true. Maybe they've got information about him. I'd love to see more about that, and especially some primary sources. But yeah, the fact that there's nothing on him prior to a year ago makes me think, well, what is really? I mean, because he's been around. It seems like he's been around a while. It doesn't seem like he just sort of popped up and started making these sorts of prophecies. It seems like he's been doing this a while, and then he's just kind of launched it on a YouTube channel, starting to get some fame that way. I'm curious. That to me is a big red flag about this guy. So I'd like to see some more information on him for sure.
He also does have a really big YouTube channel right now. He's got, I forget the exact number, but it's hundreds of thousands of subscribers.
292,000.
Yeah, and that's only blowing up further since his Trump prediction. So he is having an impact on people, and he's scaring the pants off a lot of people with his, or since we had a shirt metaphor earlier today, he's scaring the shirts off a lot of people with all this. I mean, his predictions are very frightening, and so that generates a need for discernment in a case like his. And and it's a bit difficult to discern. I guess that was kind of my major point, is that it's difficult. Yeah. What I can say from my perspective is that although I don't have proof of which category he goes in, I also don't have good evidence that he is a genuine prophet, because to judge someone a genuine prophet, I need to see repeatable cases of a prophet coming up with vertical information, meaning information that is true and not previously known to the person, and that could not be known by natural means. It doesn't all have to be about the future. It can be about other things, because prophets can talk about hidden matters rather than future matters. But I don't see a pattern with him coming up with regular, strong vertical information. I see a pattern of one hit and a whole bunch of ambiguity, either ambiguity about what's going to happen, or ambiguity about whether it's going to happen, or ambiguity about when it's going to happen. And one hit in a sea of ambiguity does not provide me with a strong basis for saying this guy's a genuine prophet. It sounds to me like this is either imagination or fraud, most likely, but it's most likely somewhere in one of those not true prophet categories.
Yeah, and to get more information to make something be more confident about what sort of category we want to put him into, I think we'll just kind of have to wait and see, honestly. And it's kind of unfortunate, given some of the things that he says is coming down the road. But just to give one example, I mean, we talked about it earlier in the stream, but he predicts after Trump, he predicts that Trump is going to be elected, first of all. So that is one area where if for whatever reason, I think the probability that Trump is elected is still relatively high. I know Biden just dropped out, and so they're kind of like they haven't decided who is going to be the Democratic nominee. So that could very well change things, and it could be that Trump loses. It still very well could be the case that Trump loses, and in that case,
it looks like he predicted two opposite things. He predicted a Trump victory in the assassination video, and it looked like he predicted that they're going to try to steal the election and the country will vote wrong in the more recent video. So whichever way he goes, he can cite one of those two videos as a hit.
Well, and then beyond that, he also predicts that there's going to be this massive economic crash after Trump is elected. And that's another area we can kind of look at. That one at least is more specific to a time frame. So like, for example, if by 2026 there is no economic crash, then I think we could safely say that he got that piece wrong. And that's a major piece. That's not a small detail. That's a major detail that he got wrong. And then I mean, even then though, he might even just say that
he can say I and my prayer buddies took care of that.
Exactly. That's sort of what contributes to the difficulty of trying to ascertain. I'm really curious to see what Mike Winger has pulled up on this guy. I know that I pulled it up earlier, the tweet that he said that he actually reached out to Brandon in a video and tried to get him to come on for an interview to talk with him a little bit more about this. But apparently, let me actually see if I can pull it up here because it's kind of interesting. You know what? I did just receive a message from somebody. Protestia. They said that they've got some information, so maybe we'll be able to post that.
Cool.
But let me do this really quickly. Let me go back to. Whoops. Oh man, did I miss it? There it is.
There it is.
Here's Mike. Yeah, here's Mike Winger's post. He says the Trump bullet prophet Brandon Biggs, who is blowing up recently due to seemingly prophesying the assassination attempt in detail, has ignored my emails asking for a conversation about issues with his many prophecies and has just deleted my comment on his video asking for the same. I take this deletion of my comment as acknowledgement that he received my request and rejects it. I'll move forward with the video without speaking to him first. I do believe he is not a prophet and is actually dangerous for people. Pictures below as my comment in the video it was on. Why share this? Because I want it to be publicly known that I tried to talk with him to no avail. So he is trying to get in contact with him, get him on his channel. Kind of one thing that I wanted to mention though is that some people pointed out that Mike kind of does the same thing when people reach out to him to talk with him or try to debate him. He says, this person says, I don't think much of him. I don't think much of him or this prophecy, but you're calling the kettle black. And then Mike kind of responds to that and says that, well, he's just trying to basically get on top of the people that are objecting, saying that he should have reached out to him first. So, but again, we'll kind of see what Mike comes up with. I'm very curious, and now I'm very curious what the Protestia channel has got for me. So let me actually switch to a scene so that we're not just showing all of these private messages on our live stream. I'll pull it up in the background, and Jimmy, feel free to share any thoughts as I look through this.
Okay. Well, I think we've kind of had, I think we've come to similar conclusions about Brandon Biggs. I don't know that we agree on all the details, but it sounds like we're both going to be sleeping pretty peacefully and not worried about all the disasters that he's prophesied on his channel. His channel, by the way, is called Last Days. And so people can if you go to YouTube and just search on Last Days, it should come up, or you could search on his name, Brandon Biggs. I'm not 100% sure where he lives in the country. I think it may be Oklahoma, because in the initial Trump assassination video, where he is with two other prophets, they mentioned the fact that they're in Oklahoma in that video. And so I think that Brandon may be either in Oklahoma or living in that part of the country. I'd love to know more about, I've only because I've only learned about him recently, I don't know a ton about him. It would be interesting to know more about his theology. One of the things I haven't mentioned is he has a different overall view of eschatology than I do. He is he seems to be a variety of dispensational premillennialist, and although he's not identical to the most common version of dispensational premillennialism, because he thinks we're in Revelation where the four horsemen of the apocalypse are coming forth. And most dispensational premillennialists think the rapture will take place before that happens. But he does seem to be broadly in the camp of dispensational premillennialism. And I've seen some people say, oh, well, therefore he's a false prophet, because they disagree with dispensational premillennialism. Well, I'm an amillennialist, so I don't disagree. I also disagree with dispensational premillennialism, but I don't think that would stop God from talking to someone. It does raise a question of, well, if God's talking to someone and dispensational premillennialism is false, why hasn't God corrected a prophet on that point? But I don't think it would altogether prevent God from talking to someone. So I'm not holding that against him. I think it raises a question, but I don't view his dispensational premillennialism as an ultimate disqualifier for could God be talking to this guy.
Okay, so I do have a source now. I've got a source from Protestia, sent me a video actually from Brandon himself, published 5 months ago, where he talks about the prophetic words that he's missed. Let me pull it up here. Yeah, so the prophetic words I've missed, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So it's a 26-minute video. I don't think we're going to have time to really go through it right here. We may do this as like a separate stream. We can maybe take a look at that and see what we want to say about it. What I can do now, though, is look at some of the comments from people saying, okay, here's one that he pinned 5 months ago. Okay, let me pull all of it up here. You guys can't really see it on the screen. It's kind of small, so I'll read it out for you guys. It says, but you didn't miss it. You weren't wrong. The Lord told me the exact same thing in 2015. Not sure what he's referring to there. He said, I need you to hoard food like you've never hoarded food before, so I did. Our problem was we didn't ask how to or what to hoard, and basically it was hoarding food that has 25 to 30 year expiration, because this is delayed. Just like when Noah built the ark, he gives time. We just don't know the time. When he told me that, it was with such urgency that I thought it was going to happen the next week. And then it didn't happen, and everyone called me nuts. He pinned this comment. But I know what the Lord told me, but we obey and keep doing what he said to prepare for. Because while we hope we don't have to go through it or whatever, we have to keep in mind he gives us earthly time to prepare, and he takes into account how bad we procrastinate. So please don't beat yourself up. You do make sense. Thank you. Yeah.
Interesting. Well, I look forward to going through this video and seeing what he has to say.
Yeah, I mean, we do have a little bit of time. I just I'm worried about trying to go through a 26-minute video live on the air before we have looked at it.
It'd be better to watch it off air and maybe come back and do an update or something.
Yeah,
I meant to ask if there were any super chats or other questions from the audience that folks had that we needed to go through.
We have not had any super chats today.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really. I guess people just didn't.
They were so fascinated listening to what we were talking about. They didn't think to.
Exactly.
But actually, that's okay, because where we really need people's assistance is on Patreon or Donor Box. Because we are still in a fundraising mode. And so, we wouldn't be doing our duty if we didn't remind you that we do need donor support right now. We're trying to get into a financially break-even position. And so if you can help us out at all, we have a number of thank you gifts that we'd like to send you for your generosity. And you can find out about them by going to Patreon. .com/Capturing Christianity. And also, if you look in the description of this video, there will be a link to Donor Box in case you're one of those folks who prefers to use a support mechanism other than Patreon. But we do need to hear from folks. We are making incremental progress, but it's a little slow right now, and we do need to ultimately get to the break-even position before the funds run out. So please do help us.
Yeah, that's really important, and we are still in a deficit right now, in terms of monthly giving. I think we've still got about $1,000 a month that we need to raise. So the amount of time that we've got, we have extended it a little bit, but we do need to raise the additional support so that we don't run out of funds in the future. So yeah, if you guys find value in the work that we're doing at Capturing Christianity, feel free to head over to our Patreon and pledge your support there. So there was one comment I wanted to highlight here. Okay, I think this one is it, and it's relatively short, and then we'll close out the stream. So this one, but you didn't miss it. Through intercessory prayer, God relented. That's not missing it. That's God changing his plan because of prayer. God bless you, Brandon, for being so humble. I mean, and this almost makes it seem, if this is accurate based on what he said in the video, and he's got a heart on it, so I assume that he approves of it. It almost makes his prophecies and the way that he's going about this unfalsifiable. Like there's literally no evidence you could provide against him being a sort of true prophet of God. If this is what you can do when you miss it, is that it's not missing it. That's God changing his plan because of prayer. And so he's got this sort of fail-safe built into his overall view of how prophecy works, so that and he's hearted it. So it seems like he's sort of endorsing it through that heart. Now maybe he would want to clarify that, but that's I think another red flag here.
Yeah, and I think it also there is such a thing as contingent prophecy, and a lot more biblical prophecy is contingent than people realize, but you can't just always go to that well. Imagine any false prophet other than the idolatrous ones in the Old Testament could say, oh, God just changed his mind because I prayed, or my buddies prayed, or something like that. And that's why the sign I announced didn't happen. It's because God changed his mind. Well, okay, there's a role for that argument, but it's a pretty limited role. And ultimately, if you want to judge someone to be a genuine prophet in a way that's in accord with reason, as opposed to, I just believe this person, there needs to be falsifiability in some form. And if you make all of your claims unfalsifiable, then you effectively undercut the evidential basis for claiming you're a true prophet, because you can never have anything but hits if you make everything unfalsifiable. So every miss you have, you've got an explanation for, well, it wasn't really a miss. God changed his mind and we claimed authority over it, and it was a plan of the devil that we averted, and all this kind of stuff. I understand why people who are already sold that someone is a true prophet might have that reaction, but fundamentally what it does is it undercuts the rational basis for believing what the person says. Because if the position is unfalsifiable, then you don't have a positive reason to believe it, because there are an infinite number of positions that are unfalsifiable. So why believe this one over that one?
All right, we did actually receive a super chat, so we'll put that one up on the screen really quickly. Guess who says, sending love to you both. Thank you for covering this. He says, my guess is he's a charlatan.
Mm-hmm. It's possible.
Again,
I wouldn't commit to that, but I think it's a possibility.
Yeah, I'm not sold on that one. So
yeah.
I think he's sincere. I think he just
Cameron, you're so young. Cameron, you're so young and trusting. You see the good in people. You need to be old and jaded and cynical like I am.
Oh gosh. No, I think I've got a good sense for when people are faking, and I don't get that sense with him here. So I think he's sincere. Again, this is just my opinion. I think he's sincere, but he's more than likely mistaken. He's more than likely mistaken what he's saying, and he just sort of happened to get it right in this instance.
One thing I don't see any evidence for here is mental illness. I also don't see any evidence for demonic activity here. I mean, haven't done a thorough study, but I'm not seeing any evidence, and I'm not seeing any evidence for psychic functioning. So I would tend to see, if assuming he's not a true prophet, which I think is fairly safe, I would say imagination and fraud are the two most likely possibilities. And it sounds like you lean a little more towards imagination, and I lean a little more towards fraud, but I could go either way.
Yeah, I think my explanation would be a little bit more filled out and complex. I would combine imagination with his specific view of Christianity. So combining that with his sort of theological framework that allows him to think that all of this is the way that things work. And you even mentioned that earlier in a phone call that too. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But you mentioned earlier how his view specifically on eschatology also plays into the way that he's sort of interpreting these things, which is got to be true because the name of his channel is literally Last Days. So he's looking, I think, for these big signs. He's looking for these enormous cataclysmic sort of earth-shattering events that are going to really shake things up and prove to us that we're truly living in the last days. Mm-hmm. So yeah, his whole eschatological view, I think, is playing a big part here.
On the imagination view, it would be these are the kinds of things that someone who's a dispensational premillennialist of this type would imagine.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, let's go ahead and wrap things up here. Jimmy, as always, it was so good to chat with you. I feel like it's been too long, even though you've probably been on the channel very recently. Yeah, I'm so happy to get another chance to sit down and talk and hang out and stuff. I debated bringing out my cowboy hat, but I settled on not bringing it out.
Whatever works for you. That's great.
Yeah. Jimmy, hey, what are you working on your channel? What you got going on?
Well, I'm actually trying to put out a video a day now. And I may experiment with more than one video. I may experiment with more than one video a day. The good thing is I appear on so many other shows that it's not too hard to put together a week's worth of content. But I have a longer term video project that I'm not yet in a position to talk about, but I'll be announcing that soon. And also, I have a course coming up on, I'm going to be teaching starting next week. I'm going to be teaching a 4-week course on Christianity and parapsychology at the Rhine Institute. It's at RHINE.edu.org. And I'm going to be covering the history and interaction between Christianity and parapsychology. A lot of people have thought that, parapsychological stuff, it's all demons. But actually, there's a range of views in Christianity, and I'm going to be covering that range. There have been some very prominent figures, including doctors of the church, like St. Augustine, Pope St. Gregory the Great, and St. Thomas Aquinas, who have believed in psychic functioning. And so we're going to be talking about them. We're going to be talking survival of bodily death, different attitudes towards near-death experiences and things like that from a Christian perspective. And so if you're interested in taking a look at the relationship between Christianity and parapsychology and the range of views that Christians have on the subject, check it out. Like I said, it's at it's rhineedu.org. Rhine is RHINE, so RHINE.edu.org, and check it out. You'd be most welcome to join us in the class.
All right, we had another super chat come in, so we'll discuss it briefly and then more than likely close out the stream. All right, Randall Chase. He can be he can be sincere, but also be sincerely wrong. He may believe what he is saying is true, but so did Joseph Smith and others. Yeah, this kind of goes back to the different categories of possibilities that Jimmy laid out early on in the stream, and him being sincere wouldn't really limit the pool of possibilities very much. It would really only rule out the fraud. Possibility. So it would still fall, like, he could be a true prophet. That could be one reason why he, or one of the possibilities that's consistent with him being sincere. But it could also be that he was sincere and just imagining things and just happened to get a hit here.
Yeah. Or he could be sincere, but he's in touch with a demon. He could be sincere, but he's a psychic. He could be sincere, but he's mentally ill. Or he could be sincere, but he's imagining things.
Yeah. So there's a lot of other possibilities. Ruling out ruling out insincerity doesn't automatically mean that he's a true prophet by any means.
Yeah.
So still very, very interesting, and we'll keep a close eye on things, especially coming up here, because as I said, there were some very specific predictions he made with a timeline that we'll be able to take a look at. But then again, we could cover them, and then he could just respond and say, well, God relented because of the prayers. So we'll nevertheless see what happens.
And here's hoping God does relent. We all need God to relent with us.
True. Amen. All right. Thank you guys for tuning in. Let me know what you think in the comments. See you guys in the next.
And before we go, just a reminder to do all those great YouTube things. You can help my channel grow by liking, commenting, and sharing the video. And be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification so that you always get notified when I have a new video. These days, I have multiple videos coming out every week. Thanks so much, and God bless you.